What is it, Petey?
One of your bad turns, have you, Pete?
Hey, why don't you sit down, Peter? You all of a tremble. You seen Tosh?
No, I haven't seen Tosha. Not lately. You, Basil?
Not that I can recollect. Here, what have you just done, Peter? I just come!
Peter, is that your banger parked out there? Seems totally surrounded by old Bill. You know what you're going to need, little brother? You're going to need a good lawyer.
No warmth, no cheerfulness, no healthful ease, no comfortable feel in any member. No shade, no shine, no butterflies, no bees, no fruit, no flowers, no leaves, no birds. November. November. There might be some sort of trivial little brief waiting for me in chambers. In November, an old man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of indecent assault, bringing briefs at London sessions and before the Uxbridge justices. Oh, God, oh, Uxbridge justices. I started 40 years ago, defending a charge of unsolicited grope on the Northern Line. And that's what I'm back to now. In my end is my beginning.
Mr. Rumpole?
Stern daughter of the voice of God, O duty. Well, Henry, my learned clerk, what are my orders today?
There's a con waiting for you, sir.
Oh?
In a new matter from Morris Nooks and Parsley.
New matter?
Yeah, the Bermondsey stabbing. Mr. Nooks says you'll have read about it in the papers.
My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, or a murder in the offing. Oh, doesn't that sound terrible? But I've got to admit it. Oh. They'll be giving me a leader in a murder.
No, they haven't mentioned a leader.
Suppose it'll be Guthrie Featherstone, QCMP. Well, it'll get me back to the Bailey, my proper stamping ground.
Mr. Rumpole?
Yeah?
There's just one thing. Your hat, sir.
My hat?
Well, yeah, the other clerks was discussing your hat, sir, over coffee.
They must be hard up for conversation in the Car Duma.
And they was passing the comment, oh, it's the subject of a good many jokes in the temple.
Really? Well, it has done the state some service, and it shows it.
Quite frankly, Mr. Rumpole, I can't send you down the Bailey, not on a top-class murder in a hat like that.
You think the jury will get a peep at the titfa and convict without leaving the box?
Now, Mr. Featherstone wears a nice bowler, Mr.
I'm
Rumpole.
not leading counsel, Henry. I'm not the Conservative Labour MP for somewhere or other. And as far as this hat is concerned, it keeps the rain out. Most of the time. My old clerk, Albert, put up with this hat for a good many years without complaint.
Yeah, well, there's been some changes made since Albert's time, Mr. Rumpole.
Indeed there has. I got some decent briefs in Albert's time. I got the Penge Bungalow murders and the Brighton forgery case. I wasn't put out to grass in the Uxbridge Magistrates' Court. Oh, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Rumpole. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Nooks.
Mr. Nooks.
And this is Miss Stebbings, Marticle Clerk. This
How
is
do you
Mr.
do?
Leslie Delgado, Mr. Basil Delgado, our client's brothers.
How do you do? How do you... Well, please, sit down, sit down. That is, of course, if you can...
Come round here.
If you can find somewhere.
Sure.
Our client, of course, is not with us.
Hardly, Mr. Rumpole.
Yeah.
Mr. Peter Delgado has been moved to the prison hospital.
He's never been a well boy, Mr. Rumpole.
Oh.
Our client's health has always been an anxiety to his brothers.
Oh, really? Yes, I see. Well, then, let's have a look. Victim's name, Tosher McBride. Anything known about him?
I believe he was a rent collector.
Oh, that's a good start. I mean, the jury will be dead against murder, but if somebody has to go, it might as well be a rent collector. Bloodstains on your brother's sleeve. I see. What's forensics say about that?
Group consistent with 10% of the population.
Including Mr. Tosher McBride's?
Yes.
And Exhibit 1, a sheath knife. Mr. McBride's blood on that?
Yes. Of course.
Oh, yes, I know. 10% of the population. The sheath knife found in your brother's old Daimler down beside the driving seat. Bloodstains on your brother's sleeve, blood-stained knife found in his car.
I know it looks black for young Peter.
Yes, well, let's say as evidence, Mr. Delgado, on which the prosecution may expect to get a conviction. Unless, of course, the judge has joined the Fulham Road anarchists or the jury's drunk.
You'll pull it off for Peter?
Pull it off? Oh, I shall merely sit behind my learned leader. You are going to Guthrie Featherstone, QC, MP of these chambers?
Well, actually, Mr. Rumpole, on this one, no.
No, but you are getting a leader, aren't you, on a murder?
Well, actually, Mr. Rumpole, my brother and I, we've heard of your wonderful reputation.
Oh, thank you. Well, of course, I did do the Penge bungalow murders without a leader. Thank you, but, of course, that was 30 years ago. They let me loose on that.
I've heard golden opinions about you, Mr. Rumpole. Golden opinions.
Nobody mentioned the hat, then?
Pardon?
Mr. Delgado's brothers are perfectly satisfied, Mr. Rumpole, to leave this one entirely to you.
Really? Well, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by a first-class murder. Oh, I'm sorry, gentlemen, that sounded callous. All these months in the Uxbridge Magistrates' Court have blunted my sensibilities. It can hardly be such a sign of summer for your brother.
We're quite confident, Mr. Rumpole, that you can handle it.
Handle it? Of course I can handle it. Please, sit down. As I always say, murder is nothing more than common assault, with unfortunate consequences.
We'll arrange it for you to see the doctor.
I'm perfectly well, thank you.
Dr. Lewis Bleen.
The well-known psychiatrist. On the subject of Mr. Peter Delgado's mental capacity.
Poor Peter. He's never been right, Mr. Rumpole. We've always had to look after him. You could call him Peter Pan, Mr. Rumpole. The little boy who never grew up.
Remember me, do you?
Dr. Bleen.
Yes. Do you know the time, Peter?
No.
Disorientated as to time.
Well, mightn't that be because he's not wearing a watch?
Where are you, Peter?
In the
Nick?
hospital wing.
Orientated as to place.
Possibly. When we last met, Peter, you told me you couldn't remember how McBride got stabbed.
No.
It appears to be a complete blotting out of all the facts.
Mightn't it be worth asking if he was there when Tosher got stabbed?
I'm afraid that given the advanced state of amnesia here, the answer might not be in the least helpful. Now then.
Well, helpful or not, shouldn't we hear it?
Mr. Rumpole, as a solicitor of some little experience, may I interject here?
If you have to.
Dr. Bleen will correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand, he's prepared to give evidence that at the relevant moment, Mr.
Yes, well,
Delgado's...
so far, I have no idea as to when the relevant moment was.
Mr. Delgado's mind was so affected that he didn't know the nature and quality of his acts, nor did he know that what he was doing was wrong.
I see. You think he was giving Tosher a warm handshake and welcome to the Rent Collectors Union?
That's not exactly how I suggest we put it to the learned judge.
Well, how do you suggest we tell it to the old sweetheart?
Guilty but insane, Mr. Rumpole.
Oh, indeed.
We rather anticipated your advice would be that. Guilty but insane in law.
And have you anticipated what the prosecution might say?
Peter has been examined by a Dr. Stotter from the Home Office. I don't think you'll find him unhelpful. Charles Stotter and I play squash together. We've had a word about this case.
What rum things you do talk about on the squash court. It's always struck me as a good game to avoid. Well, You'll be wanting to get back to your television. Oh, just one question before you go. Did you stab Tosha McBride?
I don't think the answer will be at all reliable.
I dare say you may even think the question unreliable, Doctor, but I'm asking it just the same. Because if you did, we'll call the good shrink here and Dr. Stotter, fresh from his squash court, and they'll let you off lightly. You'll go to Broadmoor at Her Majesty's pleasure. No doubt Her Majesty will be thinking of you constantly. You get a lot more telly, you'll get some exciting basket weaving, and a handful of pills every night to keep you quiet. If you're very good, they might let you weed the doctor's garden or play cricket against the warder's second 11. But I can't offer you these delights until I know, did you stab Tosha?
I think my patient's tired.
He's not your patient at the moment. He is my client.
Dr. Blean has joined us at great personal inconvenience.
Then I wouldn't dream of detaining him a moment longer.
Good day, gentlemen.
Did you do it, Petey?
Oh,
Killed him?
cutting off. It was already cut when I see him.
You see, I can't let you get sent to hospital unless you did it. But if you didn't, we'll just have to fight the case.
I want you to fight it! I'm not going in a house!
Yeah, all right. It's all right. It's all right. If we do fight it, Petey, we may very well lose. Do you understand that?
My brother says you're tip-top lawyer.
Mr. Rumpole,
Oh, really? Well, let's say I've picked up a few tricks over the years. Now then, hadn't you better tell me exactly what happened the night Tosha was stabbed?
Rumpole. You're late, bird.
Yeah, just trying to feather my nest with a rather juicy little murder.
Morris Snooks tells me he's not taking in a leader.
That's right.
Well, the last time I led you wasn't a successful.
I'm rather a backseat driver, I'm afraid.
Of course, you're an old hand at crime.
Good God, I thought you were going to say old lag for a minute.
It's a question of tactics in this case, of course. Morris was saying that if I appeared, it might make it look as if they'd rather over-egg the pudding.
Whatever pudding are you talking about?
Well, and Silk MP of a certain prominence might make it look as if this Peter, what's his name, was in a bigger league, if you know what I mean.
You think the jury would prefer a bit of good plain cooking?
You put things rather well, Horace, sometimes.
Oh, thank you.
But if I can be of any help unofficially.
Oh, I'll call on you if I can't remember how to cross-examine. I admit I lack the polish that makes it sound as polite as examination-in-chief.
That offer was made in all sincerity, you know.
Then in all sincerity, I can manage on my own.
Horace, look, I'm rather anxious to put to an end any sort of rift between the two senior men of Chambers. It doesn't make for a happy ship.
Aye, aye, sir.
Yes, well, I'm glad you agree. Seriously, Horace. We don't see enough of each other socially. Look, I've got a couple of tickets for the Scales of Justice ball at the Savoy. Why don't you join me and Marigold?
Now, let's get this straight, Featherstone.
Oh, Guthrie.
Let's get this straight, Guthrie. Are you seriously asking me to trip the light, fantastic toe with your wife?
And you bring your good lady.
My?
Your Mrs.
Are you by any chance referring to she who must be obeyed? Are you considering spending an evening out with she?
It'll be great fun.
Do you really think so?
Horace, this is rather embarrassing. Your name cropped up on the bench at our inn last week. I was lunching with Mr. Justice Brescold.
Oh, that must have been a jolly occasion. Like having dinner with the Macbeths.
Yes, and he asked me who I had in chambers, and I was able to tell him Horace Rumpole, inter alia.
You know, I can't actually imagine Frank Brescold eating. I suppose he may be brought to smell the bouquet of a grated carrot.
And he said, "Do you mean the fellow with the disgraceful hat?"
Justice Brescold was talking about my hat.
Yes, he seemed to think, forgive me for raising this, but he seemed to think that your hat set the worst possible example to the younger men at the bar.
Well, you can tell Mr. Justice Brescold from me, when next you share the bench's vegetarian platter, that the last time I appeared before him, I took strong exception to his cufflinks. To me, they look just as cheap and glassy as his eyes.
Oh, don't take offence, Horace. It doesn't do, you know, to take offence at one of Her Majesty's judges. Well, look, we'll look forward to the Savoy, and the best to your good lady.
Ow.
Rumpole?
She who must be obeyed. Yes, dear. Revenue, electricity.
What are you doing to the
Yeah.
post?
Just throwing it away, dear.
Whatever for?
You always throw it away the first time, otherwise you just encourage them to send more bills.
If you had a few decent cases, Rumpole, if you weren't always slumming around the magistrates' courts, you might not be throwing away bills all the time. What's that?
I think it's the gas.
I just saw a gas bill with a gold crest on it. It's an invitation.
Yeah.
To the Savoy Hotel. Mr. and Mrs. Horace Rumpole.
Wouldn't enjoy it.
Why wouldn't I enjoy it?
Oh, you know what it's like. Prawn cocktails and boiled shirts, watching a lot of desiccated judges pushing their overfed wives around the parquet, 2 selections from Oklahoma.
It would do you good, Rumpole. It's the sort of place that you ought to be seen at. The scales of Justice Ball.
It's impossible.
I don't see why.
Why, well, we're invited by that woman, Marigold Featherstone.
What's the matter with that? She's the wife of your head of chambers, isn't she?
She is an old boot. Marigold Featherstone is a domestic tyrant and termagant. Do you know what that poor wretched Guthrie calls her behind the back, of course? She who must be obeyed.
No.
Yes, isn't that awful? No, the ball is out. You and Marigold wouldn't hit it off at all. Must fly, murder calls.
Why, didn't you tell me we're back to murder? Oh, this is good news.
Better fun than dancing.
Took great umbrage and refused to take the call to the company. Just after that, the dagger's drawn.
Good morning, Judge. Mr. Justice Brescold. He's discussing my hat again. Oh, really? Isn't the crime rate rising? Isn't the state encroaching on our liberties? Isn't Magna Carta tottering? Whither habeas corpus? What's to be done about the number of 12-year-old girls who are making advances to old men in cinemas? What I mean is, haven't the judges of England got enough on their plates without worrying about my bloody hat?
You can't do it to Peter, I tell you. You can't do it. I mean, fight the case. How can he fight the case?
Notice of additional evidence. Prosecution witness Bernard Whelpton, known as Four Eyes.
You read that. You read what Four Eyes has to say.
Whelpton's evidence doesn't help. I'm sure you'll agree, Mr. Rumpole.
Tasha McBride used to take the mick out of Peter Delgado on account he stammered and didn't have no girlfriends. One night I saw Petey try to speak to a girl in the Paradise Rooms.
Yeah, that's my club, the Paradise Rooms.
He was asking the girl to have a drink, but his stutter was so terrible that Tosha said to her, "Come on, darling. It'll be breakfast time before this silly git finishes asking for a light air." Oh, charming. After that, I heard Peter Delgado say as he'd get Tosha, he said he'd like to cut him one night.
He's not a well boy. And what's Mama gonna feel? Her Peter going through all that for nothing.
When I came out of the Old Justice pub that night, I see Tosha on the pavement and Peter Delgado kneeling beside him with his arms round his neck. You know, it's an odd thing. Nobody actually saw this stabbing.
No, but Peter was there, wasn't he? And the knife. What about the knife?
Well, in my humble opinion, the knife in the car is completely damaged.
So, what's the answer about the knife?
Yes, Mr. Delgado. What indeed? You know, I might have had doubts about this case if you hadn't proved to me that your brother is innocent.
I did?
Yes, when you sent Dr. Louis Bleen to see him. The head shrinker extraordinaire, the guru of What's Bugging You, Cures for Listeners' Neurosis, every Thursday afternoon, Radio 4. Mr. Delgado, if you had done a stabbing and all the evidence was dead against you and along comes lovely Dr. Bleen and offers you a nice quiet trip to the hospital, wouldn't you take it?
You mean Peter turned it down?
Of course he did. He may not be all that bright, poor old darling, but he knows bloody well he didn't stab Tosha McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Rumpole.
Rumpole? Rumpole, you look quite different. Rumpole! I know what it is. You got a new hat. You went out and bought a new hat without me. Bowler. Daddy always used to wear a bowler. Yeah, I think it's an improvement. Whatever are you doing to the washing up?
Eh? I was thinking about the blood. You see, if you stab down more than once,
Careful.
you get a spray of blood over a wide area, you see.
Careful, it's going all over your clothes.
Yes, exactly, all over the place, not one great big soaking patch. And there's plenty on the cuff. Look at that, feel
Your
that.
cuffs are soaking. Oh, why couldn't you roll up your
See,
sleeves?
plenty down there, not there. That's perfectly
For
dry.
goodness sake, leave the washing up alone and let me finish it later on. Oh, by the way, I spoke to Marigold Featherstone this morning.
What?
And you know, she doesn't sound like an old boot at all. So why won't you take me to the scales at Justice Ball?
Because,
Because what?
Hilda, we are in the autumn of our years.
Thank you very much.
Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close-bosomed friend of the maturing sun, etc.
Why?
Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Think not on them. Thou hast thy music too. But not jigging up and down like a couple of punk rockers at a dance.
I doubt very much whether they have punk rockers at the Savoy. Doesn't it occur to you, Rumpole, that we never go anywhere?
I am perfectly content. I have no longing to go to the ball like bloody Cinderella.
Well, I have.
Hilda, I can't dance.
You can't what?
I can't dance. Don't ask me. I can't
You're
dance.
lying, Rumpole.
What?
Just cast your mind back to August the 14th, 1938.
Oh, God, what happened then?
We met, Rumpole. As a matter of fact, it was when we met. I shouldn't expect you to remember.
1938, of course, the year I did the Euston Bank robbery, led by your father.
Led by Daddy.
Led by Daddy.
You were young, Rumpole. Well, comparatively young. And where exactly did we meet? I'm sure you can't remember that.
At a bus stop.
At a bus stop. Of course it wasn't at a bus stop. We met in a tent.
A tent?
Well, a marquee then. There was a band and champagne and some sort of cold collation. Daddy had taken me to the Inns of Court ball to meet some of the bright young men in chambers. He told me then how helpful you'd been to him on blood groups.
Oh, hopeless on blood, dear old Daddy. He couldn't bring himself to look at those terrible photographs.
And we danced together, Rumpole. We actually waltzed together.
Oh, well, waltzing's different. It's just going round and round, isn't it?
Well, we can waltz together again, Rumpole. But you better get into training for it. Because when I rang Marigold Featherstone this morning, I told her that we should be delighted to accept the invitation. So it's all right, is it, if I RSVP it?
Fate span a bloody wheel, and I've got Mr. Justice Prescott for my first murder in years without a leader. Many a decent gambler would have shot himself for less. Frank Prescott took grave exception to my hat. And what's he staring at now? Fly buttons undone? I can't see them. Wig? Well, the wig is a bit battered. I got it second-hand from an ex-Chief Justice of Tonga in 1932. Oh, do listen to the evidence, Prescott. Stop staring at me.
Finally, Mr. Felton, I take it you haven't given this evidence out of any spirit of enmity against the man in the dock.
Ah, I'm Pete's friend. We was at university together.
My lord.
Did you say something, Mr. Rumpole?
Only that I have an objection to make, my lord, in the absence of the jury.
I've got a bit of information that'll destroy Mr. Bernie Four Eyes Welpton. You know what I mean?
What is it?
10 years ago, when he was with the East Ham minicabs, Bernie Welpton got done for perjury.
You'd better give me the details.
What is the basis of your objection, Mr. Rumpole? On the face of it, the evidence that this gentleman was at university with your client seems fairly harmless.
This may come as a surprise to your lordship.
May it, Mr. Rumpole?
But my client is not an old king's man. He did not meet Mr. Four Eyes Welpton at a May ball during 8th week. The university referred to by Mr. Welpton is in fact Parkhurst Prison.
Mr. Rumpole, I very much doubt whether the average juryman has your intimate knowledge of the argot of the underworld.
Your lordship is too complimentary.
However, I appreciate your anxiety to keep your client's past record out of the case. I think no harm has been done. Shall we have the jury back?
As your lordship pleases. First cock up by the judge.
I'm only the articled clerk.
Poor old darling spent his life at the bar in town planning.
Mr. Knox just stepped outside.
But as much idea of crime as I have of higher mathematics.
Are you ready to proceed,
Still, we do have a point for an appeal
Rumpole?
if the worst comes to the worst. Oh, yes, my lord, quite ready.
So he's got that conviction. Perjury. Rumpole will have to put it.
I'll let him know.
Mr. Welpton, when you saw my client, Peter Delgado, kneeling beside Tosha McBride on the pavement, did he have an arm round Mr. McBride's neck?
Yes,
Supporting his head from beneath?
I suppose so, yeah.
Rather in the attitude of a nurse or a doctor trying to assist the wounded man?
I didn't know your client had any medical qualifications, Mr. Rumpole.
Did you say something, Lord?
I didn't understand your client was a doctor.
This time, your lordship is perfectly right, he isn't. Could I see Exhibit 1, please, the sheath knife? When my client was holding Mr. McBride, could you see his hands?
Yeah,
Anything in them, was there?
not as I saw.
He wasn't, for instance, holding this knife.
I didn't see no
I
knife.
don't know whether my learned friend remembers. The knife was found in the car.
Exactly. So my client stabbed Mr. McBride, ran to his car, dropped the knife in, then ran back to comfort Tosha's dying moments. Is that what you were saying?
Well, he might have slipped the knife in his pocket.
Mr. Rumpole.
My lord.
This is not a time for arguing your case. It is a time for asking questions. If you feel your point has any substance in it, you will no doubt remind the jury of it when you come to make your final address at some time in the no doubt distant future.
I'm grateful to your lordship, and no doubt your lordship will remind the jury of it in your summing up in case it slips my memory. It's such an unanswerable point for the defence. Mr. Welpton, did you see Tosha McBride stabbed?
I was in the Old Justice, wasn't I?
Well, you tell us.
Well, I'm telling you, I was in the snug.
Thank you. And when you came out, Tosha...
would it not be more respectful to call that good man the deceased Mr. McBride?
If you like. When you came out, that good man, Mr. McBride, was bleeding in my client's arms.
That was the first I saw of him, yeah.
And when he saw you, Mr. Delgado let go of that good man, Mr. McBride, ran to his car and drove away. How did he get into his car?
He just pulled the door open.
So the door was unlocked?
Oh. I suppose it was, yeah.
Don't go too fast, Mr. Welpton. My lord wants the opportunity to take a note. So, he did not have to unlock the door of his car?
No, sir.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn for luncheon now. 5 minutes past 2, members of the jury.
Silence and be upstanding.
Bye-bye for now, old darling. Enjoy your nut cutlet.
What are you playing at, Mr. Rumpole? Why didn't you use Bernie's conviction?
You really want to know?
This is the boy's mother, Mr. Rumpole. We all want to know, the whole family.
Point one. So far, I have kept your brother's record out of this case. If I introduce the convictions of a prosecution witness, the jury will get to know about Petey's 12-month stretch for unlawful wounding in 1970. Do you want that?
Well, I was only trying to...
Point two. Mr. Welpton's perjury was for forging a passport application. I've checked it. And point three, I need my lunch.
Mr. Rumpole, I'm only the boy's mother.
Oh, don't underestimate yourself, madam. You have bred 3 sons who've given a great deal of employment to the legal profession.
For God's sake, what have we got here?
Exactly what you asked for, Mr. Delgado. The counsel of your choice. Lunch?
Inspector, you photographed Mr. Delgado's old Daimler when you got it back to the station.
Yes.
And was it then exactly as you had found it outside the Paradise Rooms?
Exactly.
With the driver's door unlocked and the window open?
Yes, we found the car unlocked.
So it would have been easy for anyone to have thrown something in through the window, or indeed to put something in through the driver's door.
I don't follow you, sir. Something.
Something like this knife, for instance, could have been thrown into Mr. Delgado's car in a matter of moments.
I suppose it could, sir.
By the true murderer, whoever that was, when he was running away. Note from the judge. Dear Rumpole, your bands are falling down and showing your collar stud. No doubt you would wish to adjust it. What is this, a murder trial or a bloody fashion parade? Inspector, we have heard Mr. Tosha McBride described as a rent collector.
Is there to be an attack on the dead man's character, Mr. Rumpole?
I don't know, my lord. I'm sure there are charming rent collectors, just as there are absolute darlings in inland revenue.
Silence!
Where were these rents collected?
Business premises.
What sort of business premises?
Cafes, my lord, pubs, minicab offices.
And do you know what remedies were taken if the rents were not paid?
I assume proceedings were taken in the county court, Mr. Rumpole.
Oh, alas, my lord, some people have no legal training. If the rents were not paid, sometimes these business premises caught on fire, did they not?
Sometimes they did.
To put it bluntly, that good man, Tosha McBride, was a collector for a protection racket.
Well, officer, was he?
Yes, my lord, I have reason to believe that he was.
And if Mr. McBride had been sticking to the money he'd collected, that would have provided a strong motive for murder for someone other than my client. Stronger than a few unkind words about his speech impediment.
That surely is a question for the jury, is it not, Mr. Rumpole?
Indeed it is, my lord. And for no one else in this court.
Leslie.
Mr. Thistleton, as a scientific officer, you have lived with bloodstains almost as long as I have.
Almost.
You have examined all the clothing worn by my client on the night in question.
I have, my lord.
You've examined all the pockets.
I have.
Are there any bloodstains in any of the pockets?
There are none.
So, there can be no question of a blood-stained knife having been hidden in any of the pockets while my client was nursing the deceased in his arms.
Well, of course not.
Ah, you find the suggestion amusing.
Yes, I do. The idea is ridiculous.
You may be interested to know that it's on that ridiculous idea the prosecution's basing its case.
My lord.
Yes, that was a most improper observation, Mr. Rumpole.
Then I pass from it with dispatch, my lord. Mr. Thistleton, had my client stabbed Tasha McBride repeatedly in the neck, you would expect a spray of blood over a wide area of clothing?
You might have found that.
With small drops spattered from repeated forceful blows.
I should have expected it.
In fact, you found nothing of the sort.
No.
And you would have found blood in the area of the cuff of the coat or the shirt.
Most probably.
Instead, all we have is a large soap patch in the crook of the left arm.
Yes.
Totally consistent with my client merely having supported the deceased's head as he lay bleeding in his arms.
Not inconsistent.
Not inconsistent. Mr. Thistleton, doesn't not inconsistent when translated into plain English mean consistent?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. There you are, Petey. Your brother wants to sack me.
The position is, Mr. Delgado is a little perturbed at the course this case is taking.
Mr. Leslie Delgado is not my client.
He thinks we've got on the wrong side of the judge.
Oh, would he like to point out, purely for my personal information, the right side of Mr. Justice Prescold? Who does his lordship think he is? Court correspondent for the Tailor and Cutter? Look, Petey, old sweetheart, I've abandoned that judge. He'll sum up dead against you, that's obvious. But if we can let the jury think he's the sort of bloke that shoves airwick up his nose every time he so much as smells a real human being, we might have got somewhere. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Leslie Delgado is definitely dissatisfied. This puts me in a very embarrassing position.
Oh, cheer up, Nooks, old darling. Your position isn't nearly as embarrassing as Petey's. Well, do I go or stay? And now, members of the jury, I would like to draw your attention to a man we have not seen. He is not in the dock. He has not appeared in the witness box. I don't know where he is now. Perhaps he is savoring the delights of the Costa Brava, lying beside the heated swimming pool with his aperitif and reading his airmail edition of the Daily Express. Perhaps he is very near to this court, waiting for news. Wherever he is, I shall call him Mr. X. Did Mr. X employ Tasha McBride as a collector in one of his protection rackets? And had Tasha McBride betrayed his trust? So that on that fateful night, outside the Old Justice pub, Mr. X waited with this knife, and when he saw his faithless servant emerge from the shadows, he struck. Not once, not twice, but you have heard the evidence. 3 times in the neck. But you are the only judges of facts in this case. And if you find Peter Delgado guilty, then Mr. X will smile and order up champagne. Because wherever he is, he will know that he is safe at last.
The jury are still out in the Bermondsey murder case. Summing up today, the judge told the 7 men and 5 women that if they thought there was any force in the defense argument, they would acquit. But, he added, the evidence called for the prosecution was almost overwhelming.
Earlier, Mr. Horace Rumpole, appearing for the defense, had suggested the guilt of an unknown man, a Mr. X, counsel called him, who would smile and order up champagne if Peter Delgado...
Hello? Rumpole!
What? No, they're not back. They've been out for hours. Well, yes, I'll just have to meet you there, that's all. No, I can change in chambers. Ah, Hilda, I want this firmly understood. I am not dancing. Under no...
The jury is coming back. I think we've got a verdict, Mr. Rumpole.
Jury's back. Farewell. Trailing clouds of glory do we come. Well, Petey. Well, what are you looking so bloody miserable about? They might have found you guilty. Well, where's the champagne? I expected a party. Oh, come on, cheer up. My God, I don't know what you'd be like if you'd lost.
I was meant to lose.
Who meant you to? The prosecution? Of course. Mr. Justice Prescold, indubitably. Fate, destiny, the spirit of the universe. Not as it turned out. The verdict was written in the stars. Not guilty of murder. And is that the verdict of you all?
That's why they chose you. I was meant to lose.
I don't follow.
Bloke, while I was waiting in a cell, used to know Bernie Four Eyes. He told me why my brothers chose you to defend me.
Oh, well, I do have a certain reputation in the temple, you know. My crown may be a bit tarnished. Been doing a bit too many indecent assaults lately.
You heard them talking round the paradise rooms about this old fella Rumpole.
Did you know that the Penge Bungalow murders are in notable British trials? I suppose I may have become a bit of a household name in criminal circles.
I was looking for a barrister that was sure to lose.
I suppose after this, I can get back to a better quality of crime. What did you say?
They wanted me defended by someone they could count for a guilty verdict. That's why they beat you for it. They wanted to fit me up with doing, Todger.
Just a minute. You mean your brothers picked me to nobble your defence?
That's it. You was to be the jockey like that pulled me back.
Indeed. And how did they come to light on me exactly? Me, Rumpole of the Bailey.
Heard of an old bloke down the little bits of pieces round the magistrate's court. Bit of a muddle they heard. Got past it with a funny old tit-fat.
A bloody hat again.
So they reckoned you was just a bloke to lose. I shouldn't have told you. Well, perhaps it's all lies. You hear lots of stories in the cells under the Bailey.
Yeah. Up in the bar mess, too. They rubbish your reputation. Have a cigar.
All right.
Well, Petey, where does this leave you? Eh?
Well, same, Mr. Rumpole. None too...
safe?
Yeah, what about you?
What?
Where does it leave you?
Oh. Yes.
You look charming.
Charming.
my dear. Really, Rumpole, she.
She?
She?
Oh, she! A woman of fabulous beauty, written up by H. Rider Haggard. Waiter! The tide's gone out.
Your husband's had a good wind.
Oh, he hasn't had just a good wind, Guthrie. He's had a triumph.
A triumph, and solely due to my old hat. Here's to it.
What?
My triumph, or rather my great opportunities, due to my hat.
Nonsense.
What?
He's talking nonsense. He doesn't
Oh.
know from time to time. No, Rumpole run because... Rumpole run because he knows so much about blood.
Really?
Well, Daddy, you remember my late Daddy, don't you? Well, of course you do. He used to be your head of chambers. Well, Daddy told me, Rumpole Daddy told me, in fact, he told me on the occasions of the Inns of Court ball, which is practically the last dance we went to.
Hilda.
No, I am going to say this, Rumpole. Don't interrupt him.
No.
Horace Rumpole, Daddy told me, knows more about bloodstains than anyone we've got in training.
Oh, do give over, Hilda. Look, Marigold's gone quite pale.
Don't you find it, well, sordid sometimes?
What?
Crime. Don't you find it terribly sordid?
Oh, I say, do be careful. Don't knock it, Marigold.
I think it must be sordid.
Abolish crime. You abolish the very basis of our existence.
Oh, come on, Horace.
He's right. He knows about bloodstains.
Abolish crime, we would all vanish. The prawn cocktail, the duck à l'orange, the selections from Oklahoma, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces. What do you think pays for all this?
Blood.
Crime.
Don't you help them?
Don't I what?
Help them doing all these crimes. I mean, after all, you get them all.
Ah, not today, Marigold. I didn't help them. No, I wasn't grateful.
You got Peter Delgado off.
For one reason.
What was that?
Blood.
He was innocent.
Oh, come on, Horace. How can you be sure of that?
Do you know, it's a most extraordinary thing, my learned friend. We go through all the mumbo-jumbo. We put on the wig and the gown. We mutter the ritual prayers. If your lordship pleases, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Abracadabra, fee-fi-fo, bloody pum.
Yes, well...
And just when everybody thinks you are going to produce the most ludicrously faked piece of cheesecloth ectoplasm, there it is. Clear as a bell. The truth. Don't you find it?
Well, there are two ways.
You know, it's bloody scaring sometimes, eh? But there it is, the truth. Naked and embarrassing. Oh, Nooks. Shady Nooks.
Please excuse me. I'd like a con with you in the morning, Mr. Featherstone. Is that the talk convenient for you?
Really? Why? What's happened?
I believe it was on the 10 o'clock news. They've arrested Leslie Delgado. Charged him with the murder of Tosha McBride.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
Is there any evidence?
They discovered McBride was working for Leslie. And there are a couple of witnesses who say they saw Leslie and heard Leslie setting the whole thing up. Members of the Robertson family.
Wouldn't
be at all
you
surprised.
like to take me on, Nooks? Or would that be rather over-egging the pudding?
Yes, well, in that case, you will want early advice on evidence, and get me all the form you can on the Robertsons. What was that, Rumpole?
Hilda,
Yes, dear? What is it?
Hilda, I have the most extraordinary feeling.
What is it? What do you want?
I want to dance. Come along, my darling.
Excuse us.
Wait. Mind the step. the two sleepy people together. I'm also in love with you. The lost wolves will lost